ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। So, in one of our previous classes, which we conducted from Bharati Vidya Bhavan, we were discussing about the threefold nature of the body, threefold classification, which is Sthula body, Sukshma body, and the innermost Karana Sharira or Karana body, causal body. So if we classify it according to these three categories or three, you can say, three levels, the gross level, the subtle level, and the causal level. But if we go into a little more detail, we can also classify the body as the human personality, not just the body. The human personality as a fivefold entity. The five divisions are Annamaya Kosha, that is the body made of flesh, blood, bones, and everything that is tangible, that is solid, or maybe it is material, the material body, you can say. Then we have the energy body or the Pranamaya Sharira or Pranamaya Kosha, and then we discussed in detail about the two levels of the mind, the Manomaya Sharira, Manomaya Kosha, and the Vijnanamaya Kosha, and finally the Anandamaya Kosha. And in our previous class, we were discussing the self has a tendency to be identified with the buddhi more than the manas. Manas and buddhi are two aspects of the mind, but we identify, the person who is spiritually inclined, his buddhi is developed. And the higher the personality, the higher his identification with the buddhi. It's a very plain and simple logic. At the animal level, he will identify himself with the body primarily. But in stronger animals who have a very powerful prana, who can kill, who can dominate over other creatures like the lion, elephant, they have tremendous power. So the Pranamaya Kosha also is equally important in such creatures. But as we go up the ladder of evolution, you will find that we start living more and more at the intellectual level, at the skill level, which is Manomaya Kosha. That you will find not only in human beings, but also in some highly developed animals, well-trained animals, like dogs, who can develop, with the help of human beings, of course, they can develop a lot of mental skills, which are repetitive actions. They are actions and reactions. So manas is not something which is exclusive to human beings alone. They are common with the animals, and in fact, in some cases, depending on the skill, the sense of smell, the sense of sound, their sense organs may be more powerful than human beings, and they develop skills to such an extent. Even they say the elephant, its memory is so sharp that it can identify a person even after several years. So there is this manas, a highly intellectual, a capacity to do certain skills with the help of prana and Annamaya Sharira, of course. They can smell better, they can listen to sounds, and they are more sensitive than human beings. So at the Manomaya Kosha, even if the Manomaya Kosha or the third level is very well developed, you can't say human being is spiritual. Spiritual development takes place. We came up to that point. When the self is identified not with just the body, not with just the prana, not with just the manas or Manomaya Kosha, which anyway animals do, sometimes better than us. But our speciality is that the more a human being is identifying his own personality with the buddhi, which is the fourth level. Out of the 5 levels, the buddhi level is supposed to be unique to human beings. And the self identifies in a spiritual state, or maybe when the beginning of the spiritual journey, it starts identifying itself with the buddhi because of man's failure to discriminate it from its limiting adjunct. Just as you may tell 100 times that don't identify yourself with the body. No matter how much you try, if you pinch, you will feel the pain. You can't say my mind or my self can be detached with the body. We may try to bear pain, or we may try to say that I don't feel the pain, use a lot of willpower, mental power to say that I don't feel, but at the same time you still feel. So though it's easy to say to get rid of body consciousness, we require a lot of effort and identification with something which is more subtle, so that the gross falls off. It is a very, you can say, a natural process. If you are on the 4th floor, naturally you are away from the 1st floor. But still you have to pass through the 1st floor, 2nd floor, 3rd level. And as you develop these levels, a human being, when he comes to the level of buddhi and starts living more and more at the level of buddhi, he may be still limiting himself. That is not the end of the goal of spiritual life, to identify oneself with the buddhi. But it is much better than the lower levels. It's much better than to be a person with wisdom, with spiritual wisdom, than one without. Otherwise, what's the difference between animals and us? Maybe our skill sets may be better than animals. We may be more skillful and manipulate them to our advantage. That is what human beings have done. They've used their skills to dominate over other animals. That is the only achievement we can boast of. But if you go higher, the uniqueness of a human being to identify with the buddhi, according to the scriptures, is much better than identifying with the body, mind, or body, prana, or the mind. But at the same time, one should know that even if one identifies more and more with the buddhi, a little bit of, till one is fully realized, till one becomes free, totally free, till you attain moksha, the attachment to the body may be less, attachment to the prana may be less, attachment to the manomaya kosha also may be less, but it is still there. So some trace will always remain. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say, no matter how much you try to cut the ego, it somehow shoots again. Because a little bit of that I remains. It is so difficult to get rid of that ahankara, because it's ahankara is also one of the aspects of the manomaya kosha. And also, so that identification with the buddhi also requires some kind of ahankara. You say my buddhi. So being mixed, even that in that state, one is proud about one's spiritual wisdom, and they partake of each other's nature. So when a person becomes very intelligent, when he understands the spiritual truths by reading books, by listening to discourses, and now on media, there's so much of materials. There's so much of material available on all the subjects, especially spirituality. There are secular subjects as well. But spirituality in the past, before the age of social media came, it was restricted to people had to travel a lot of distance to go to a monastery or to go to some place where these truths were explained, and that too, one had to follow a very strict, rigorous discipline, because the teachers knew that just teaching them these words and learning certain Upanishads, Gita, and other things by heart and able to understand them would not suffice. They have to realize the truth in their own life. But that is a big challenge. For that, you have to very patiently obey the instructions of the teacher, and very few people had patience. So spirituality was restricted to only a few people. But now, just as there is an information, just as in earlier days, to be able to get even secular knowledge, you have to go to good universities, or even you had to read books, go to libraries. But now, because of the media, one can access knowledge much more easily, though it is even in secular subjects, it is not foolproof, but still you have access, whether it is complete knowledge or incomplete knowledge, you have. And you don't have to make much effort. It is easily available, so easily available that the Manomay Kosha enjoys the identification of this self, that is the ego, with one's buddhi at a lower level, not at the higher level. If the buddhi really discriminates between the real and unreal, then it will understand where the mistake is. But I am talking of a lower level of buddhi, where an intellectual understanding of the spiritual subjects. Mind you, I am not talking of the secular subjects. That is done at the level of manas. Excellence in mathematics, excellence in secular subjects, that can be acquired. Can get a good university degree in that. It all depends on how skillful you are and how skillfully you are trained. But I am talking of even spiritual subjects at a lower level. There is a Shravana, there is a Manana, intellectual understanding. But even in the path of Jnana, they say you need a nididhyasana or meditation or identification more and more with the truths that you are reading, which very unfortunately does not happen, especially when our learning is restricted to YouTube videos or any material which comes very easily, which is not a result of a tradition or a strict discipline or some serious meditation on that, with of course instructions to meditate. Because even nididhyasana, it's not just thinking deeply. That is good for academic knowledge of the scriptures, the Upanishads. One can quote where this Upanishad, what does this Upanishad say, what does Gita say. It's all fine. But without a technique of meditation or technique of nididhyasana, meditation is in the yoga school, but without a technique of meditation or nididhyasana in the Jnana school, it is very difficult to benefit from such theoretical knowledge of the scriptures. That is what this Upanishads say. They take of each other's nature. The ego identifies with one's buddhi, and it maybe a little arrogantly thinks, just as Newton said that I am on the seashore. I have taken a little bit of sand, but there are many things I have not explored, and I feel very humble. That is as far as secular knowledge is concerned. So even a great scientist thinks that what he has understood is very little of this vast universe. So what to speak of the spiritual knowledge? But still, as they say, it gets mixed up with each other's nature. The self, which is pure consciousness, getting identified with the body, thinks it is a body, getting identified with the prana, thinks it is a prana. I'm strong, I'm weak, I am powerful, I'm mighty, because its prana is manifesting more. A lion definitely thinks that it is a strong animal compared to a mouse, because it has a very strong prana, strong annamaya kosha, body as well. So the ego is identifying with successive layers of our personality, and then it thinks of itself, the body or the personality thinks of itself as a strong, a highly intelligent person, or a highly skillful person, or a highly spiritual person. But as long as that ego is there, that means the reflection, the pure consciousness is reflected in the buddhi. It is not the pure consciousness itself. Then that person will never talk of superiority or inferiority, because he is feeling his oneness with Brahman, who is great, who is young, who is small, who is spiritually inferior. Everyone is the same. That is what Sri Ramakrishna used to feel. He was as humble as a 5-year-old child. Why? Because he did not see somebody as inferior, or because there was only one that he saw, the pure consciousness or the Divine Mother, which he saw everywhere. But unfortunately, at the slightly lower level of the buddhi, that's why the Gayatri Mantra, when we say Dhiyo Yona Prachodayata, develop my Dhi. Dhi needs to be developed. Buddhi is not something you realize once for all. Just as you have to develop the prana, develop the body through exercise, through discipline. You have to develop the mental skills, manas. So also you need to develop your buddhi. It's a long process, long drawn process. That is the essence of spiritual life, that we begin spiritual life when we understand that there is a higher power than the intelligent mind, which is known as buddhi, and that buddhi reflects more of the light of the Atman, light of that pure consciousness, than the lower 3 levels. That is why buddhi is superior, but it is not the ultimate. It is endowed, the mind is endowed, the overall mind, along with the skill sets, the academic understanding of the scriptures. The characteristics of buddhi which are normally seen are some kind of, you can say, viveka, discrimination between what is important, what is not important. That person becomes wise. He stops running after temporary things. He knows their value, their relative value. He may use it, but he knows it has a limited value to make him reach the ultimate goal of life. So, the example that is given in the Upanishads and in some other commentary is the light which is pure is definitely reflected through green glass, through blue glass, through opaque glass, or through dense glass, or through transparent glass. But you will find that the power of the light is less visible in a dark glass. A glass a glass with a dark shade will transmit less light. So same way, the buddhi which is material, you see, this is one concept which Westerners find it difficult to understand. That how can buddhi be material? According to the human personality, buddhi is, the mind is also material. It's a finer matter. We don't make any distinction. All the things that you see around you in Prakriti, including the buddhi, is matter. Jada. Chaitanya is only one, that is Atma. So the consciousness, buddhi appears to be bright. How? Buddhi appears to be bright because the transparency is more. The more light passes, suppose there are 4 or 5 different colored glasses, dark colored glasses. The bright light appears to be very dim. That is why when it reflects through the body or through the prana, the Atma is reflected even in the body. But it is a very poor reflection. As you go higher and higher in evolution, at the level of the mind, you will find that the reflection becomes more and more, or the transmission of that pure light is brighter and brighter. So the buddhi appears to be intelligent. You have to remember this. Buddhi is just an instrument. It is just an instrument like a healthy body or a healthy prana or a healthy mind is. So just because one has a very sharp buddhi doesn't make that person free. He is on his way to freedom, but moksha is quite far. He has just begun the journey. And a little light means a little feeling of that consciousness, that reflected consciousness. It is like seeing the reflection of the sun on the snow. We suddenly are overwhelmed by the reflection and we think, oh, such a wonderful light. But after all, it is a reflected light. Just because we are not able to see directly the light of the sun, we are happy even with the reflected sunlight which we see around us. We are in fact blinded by that. So we have to wear our goggles to reduce the impact of that light. So also a little awakening of the buddhi, a spiritual aspirant thinks that he has understood everything. And he doesn't understand. So here the Upanishads are Vedanta is making it very clear. Don't take these little visions, these little experiences to be something phenomenal. It may happen. It's just a reflection of that consciousness in our limited minds. The manas, the buddhi, and also the Anandamaya kosha. Because it is reflected. In the Anandamaya kosha, it is reflected as pure joy. Whereas in the buddhi, it is still reflected as partial joy. It's not full joy. You no doubt have the joy of discrimination, that I understand this, I am a wise man, I know better than somebody else. That may give you a little joy. Joy in the sense, you may feel that I am not as ignorant or as bound as the other people are. See how they are struggling because of the gross mistakes they are making in life. They are running after something which ultimately will be snatched away from them. That mad race, as that famous Tolstoy story said, the person was running because he was told that as much as you run from sunrise to sunset, that much land will be yours. So his only goal was to cover as much land he can by running. So he was running, did not stop for food, went on running, and finally, when it was about to set, he still saw that, oh, there's some beautiful land. I can even get that land also. So he continued his running, and because till sunset, whatever he covered, but he was very, very exhausted. And finally he died just before sunset because he was trying to cover that extra meters, extra yards. But unfortunately, he reached the end of his life before the sun set. He exhausted himself so much. So seeing this mad race, and finally the author says, see, he ran so much, but all he managed to get is 3 cubits of land where he was finally buried. That's the only place he got, which he would have got anyway without running. So, seeing the foolishness of people who are running after gross pursuits, these people with intelligence, with a little buddhi, discrimination, they think they are far superior. But compared to men of realization, even they are ignorant. Because they may have renounced the world, they may have given up this false running after, but still they have not realized. Till one realizes the one consciousness which is reflecting in this buddhi. It's just a reflection that we are seeing. So that is why Swami Brahmananji once was asked, Thakur gave you everything. He even gave you the highest realization. Why do you still do spiritual practices? So you know what he said? First thing he said is, Thakur might have given, but I have to make it my own. Means I have to still experience that highest realization. And he said, Nirvikalpa Samadhi is the beginning of spiritual life. Who knows, there are so many more goals to achieve. The destination is far from having been achieved by me. So I am beginning my struggle. So if he says that, so one can imagine what is the depth of spiritual experience that is required to understand that even buddhi is a reflected consciousness. The little light of reflection of the knowledge of the Atman in this buddhi, the Upanishads say, in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, there is a beautiful passage, 4:4-5. Sava ayamatma brahma vijnanamayo manomaya pranamaya chakshurmaya shrotramaya prithvimaya apomaya vayumaya akasham tejomaya kamamaya akamamaya akrodhomaya dharmomaya adharmomaya sarvamaya iti. Means this self, it is going from the subtle to the gross now. How we identify this body of ours? It's a very subtle passage. Identification is not just with the body or with the mind or prana. It percolates down. The light passes through several layers of Like suppose there is a glass, behind that is a transparent screen, behind that there is something else. So the light that you see first passes through the bright glass. If you remove the screen, then the bright light comes. Now you put the curtains, but still the curtain is very mild. It does not block all the light. So some of the light passes through that, but it is much dimmer than the previous. If you had opened the screen, the curtain, the whole light would have come in a much, the light would have been much more bright. But suppose you put a thicker curtain, which is the Annamaya Kosha, as it becomes more and more jada, buddhi also is a kind of, it's a part of Prakriti, which is subtle, but still it is jada. But it is less jada. Jada means inert. It's not conscious. It's the reflected consciousness of the glass that you see. It is just like sun is reflecting through the glass window, and you think that is the window which is shining. It's a reflected light. Or the moonlight. Moon is just reflecting sun's light, and we think moon is giving its own light. So also he says, the self is indeed that Brahman, which is first identified with the buddhi, then with the manas, then with prana, then with the eyes, the organs, that is body, chakshu, then with the ears, then with earth. The earth is a more grosser substance, with water, with air, with fire. These are the different 5 elements. You see, in Indian philosophy and the Upanishads, all the elements are classified into like solid, liquid, gas. We have earth, we have water, Prithvi up means water, Teja, Vayu, Prithvi up, Vayu, Teja. Teja is fire. And what is other than fire? Now they have not given the whole list. They said everything other than fire, with desire and without desire. Because you see, the things change, the whole perspective, whole attitude towards life. Whether you will see the gross or whether you will see the subtle depends on with desire or without desire. The more the desire, the more you are material. The less the desire, the more you are spiritual. So with desire or without desire. Both are ignorant, but one is more ignorant than the other. With virtue or without virtue. The evil-minded person from a lower point of view is definitely worse or more material than the man with virtue. But that doesn't mean the man with virtue has attained spirituality. It may not be. A perfectly moral person may not be a perfectly spiritual person. He's definitely better than the person with a lot of bad habits, evil habits. So with virtue or with absence of virtue, with everything, with this what is perceived, with that means that Atma. So the Atma is reflected. It is percolating through all these layers of human personality and giving us an illusion, and including ego. Ego is also one part of the mind. Manas, buddhi, ahankara and chitta. The samskaras, the old samskaras, which also, even if your ego identifies with the buddhi, it identifies with the manas, it identified with your skills. Sometimes it identifies even with your old samskaras. You may think, for example, when you are sleeping, all your organs, everything has gone to sleep. Nothing is active. But what is active? It is that feeling that I am sleeping, I had a good sleep. So the ego is still there, watching the Anandamaya Kosha. That is why they say deep sleep, even if it is for a short while, gives you a lot of joy. Why? Why do we try so much to get some good quality sleep? Because that is a daily requirement. Otherwise, person will get mad or maybe become ill. Everybody needs sleep because he is touching unconsciously the Anandamaya Kosha, the highest joy. He doesn't know where that joy comes, but at least he is unconsciously enjoying that joy. So every night or whenever he is tired, the whole body mechanism helps him to go to sleep, to enjoy that joy, to enjoy that bliss, which is one of the aspects of the Atman. It's pure consciousness, Sat, a pure consciousness, Chit. It is also Sat, pure existence, eternal existence, non-transitory, permanent, and also it is Ananda, Swarupa. So that is what it says, the individual self. Now, how is the individual self realized by a person? And where does he realize it? Where is the location in the human personality? So one of the entry points of this realization of Atman is described in the Kathopanishad 2.3.17. You know, Latu Maharaj had perceived this even before he had read about Kathopanishad or heard about Kathopanishad. When Swami Shuddhanandji was explaining to this, he jumped for joy because he had seen this vision. He had made an entry into that. How did he see that Atman? The individual self, that is, we are not talking of the supreme self. We are talking of the gateway, the individual self, which ultimately is nothing but the supreme self. But before the identification happens, it is said to be of the size of a thumb. Perhaps you see it as a size, that bright glow. It's one of the ways of experiencing that Atman. Because the space inside the spiritual heart, where it is manifest, is tiny like a thumb. Now, Latu Maharaj had, or Swami Adbhutananda had such experiences. It's not that he read from the book and said, yes, in the Kathopanishad it is said. He had the experience before. And when some Panditji was explaining, Swami Shuddhanandji was a great scholar, he was explaining the Kathopanishad. He said, yes, this is what I saw. You are 100% right. Not because Shankaracharya has said or commented upon that or some Upanishad says. No, I have seen it. Free from its limiting adjuncts, the indwelling self is this indwelling self. If one realizes it by experience, then only it is realized as Brahman without any limiting adjuncts. What are the limiting adjuncts? They are known as upadhis. What is a upadhi? Upadhi is anything that makes you think what it is not. For example, it is reflected. Light reflected through a green glass. A dark blue glass is one light. There's one upadhi. Blue, slightly pink or light yellow color reflects more light, so that is another upadhi. It is a subtle upadhi, but definitely it limits less light. Whereas if it is a transparent glass, then it practically allows all the light to pass through. But yet it is not the light. So even buddhi is incomplete. But one who realizes, according to the Upanishad says, Angushta matra purusho antaratma sada jananam hridaye sannivistha. Tvam, that omnipresent being, Purusha, ever exists in the hearts of men as the innermost self of the size of the thumb. Him should man carefully distinguish from the threefold body, as if separating the slender stalk of the munja grass. Now, there is a grass which normally they used in puja. There is a munja grass and there is a very thin, you can say, slender stalk within. If you remove the outer covering, there is a tendency that it will break. So if you want the tender stock inside, you have to slowly remove without breaking it and pull it out. It's a very subtle thing. So also your meditation should be such. You should focus on the inner self, or this Angushtamatra Purusha, the omnipresent being, with so much care and carefully through meditation. And that you should know as effulgent, effulgent and immortal. So that is when you get realization. Now, this light, maybe one can get a glimpse of that, as Latu Maharaj had. But to make it permanent, as Raja Maharaj said, Swami Brahmanandaji said, one has to see it continuously. As Thakur used to say, I see infinite light. After his first vision, he saw the infinite light of consciousness pervading everything. Wherever he saw that same light percolating, the same Divine Mother, or that infinite consciousness, which he called the Divine Mother. That was his concept of mother. It was all pervading. So that is the kind of vision we have to remember. Of course, we have to experience it, but till then we have to contemplate on it, that the being illumined by the light of the self, which is not without or within, it is within. You have to experience it within, and it shines through the buddhi, then shines through the prana, shines through the mana, shines through the eyes, shines through everything that we possess. And in the process, it illuminates the whole thing. So buddhi is the instrument. It is like the glass through which you allow the light to pass. It is itself jada, but it is the instrument for perception of all the objects that we see through our eyes, through our smell, through our nose, ear, through our ears. So that is why Brihadaranyaka Upanishad says, there is a beautiful verse, Anyatra Atmana Abhuvam Na Darsham Anyatra Mana Abhuvam Na Shrausham Iti Manasa Eva Pashyati Manasa Shrunoti. That means, it is giving an example. He says, what happens if that light of consciousness is not percolating through our ears? As we say that the light passes through the buddhi to the manas to the body, the different organs, and then all these things appear to us. So because that light is there, that is why some people, he says, how do you know that? Because if that light is not allowed, light of buddhi is not allowed to percolate, then a person may see, but he will not see. You say, I am absent-minded. My mind was somewhere else. My mind was not seeing, though it was seeing, the eyes were seeing, but it was not recording. The consciousness behind that was not shining. I did not hear it, though the sound was there. It is though the mind that one sees and hears. It is only through the mind. That is the buddhi, the higher aspect of the mind, that is buddhi. It is only through the buddhi that you see. Because sometimes the light may be there, the sound may be there, the eyes may see, the ears may hear. But because the buddhi was not attached to it. That is why the importance, other organs that you see, that man possesses, should be understood as only the channels of the buddhi. So first the light is reflected in the buddhi, then only you can see all other things. It is true that without say external light, nothing can be seen. But external light helps the eyes only when they are associated with consciousness. That is why a person cannot see things in broad daylight if he is absent minded or asleep with the eyes open. There are people who just seem to be so absent minded, absorbed in our daydreaming, that they are seeing things happening in front of us, they just don't notice. So, the inner light of consciousness first has to pass. The point that Upanishads make here is why buddhi is so important. Why spiritual practice is necessary to awaken the buddhi. Because the buddhi is like a torchlight. If you have a very weak torchlight, no matter how hard you struggle, you can't see things properly in the room. You don't see, you may get delusions. You may see the snake as a rope as a snake, depending on the light. There is some mild light. But if there is a bright light, you can see the rope as a rope, snake as a snake. So you know what is temporary, what is permanent, what should you run after, what you should not run after. That discrimination comes when the buddhi, light of buddhi shines. So that's why Upanishad says, remember, this light of buddhi is so important that it has to illuminate your whole life. It has to illumine your decisions. It has to illumine your choices in life. It has to illumine your, you may say, the rights and wrongs, the options. As you said, the choices that we make. What will take us towards more light? If you go towards light, you will get light. If you go towards darkness, you will get darkness. So the choice is ours. And for that choice, you should have light. The more the light of consciousness shines in your mind, through the percolating through the mind, then your body, mind, the body, the senses, they follow the right path. Otherwise, if the light is not clear, it will just follow the path it is naturally accustomed to. And that is what we call as wrong choice in life. Wrong choice means an ill-informed decision. When you take a decision, you make sure, even if you want to buy a car or buy a refrigerator or anything from the market, you take a well-informed decision. You ask several people, you see the manual, you see the features, and then you take a decision. You just don't go and whatever the salesman says, you don't buy. So also, if the light is not clear, if you are not well informed, if the buddhi does not show all the corners of the room, you can't choose the right thing. That is what it says. So, to manifest things, even in the world, the light of buddhi is required. And to develop spiritually, of course, without buddhi, nothing can happen. That is the beginning point. So all perceptions, all activities of man are due to the radiance of the luminous self permeating the buddhi, permeating the mind at a lower level, permeating the organs, and finally the body. The process of permeation of the light of consciousness is described by Shankaracharya. He, in his commentary to the same verse, he says buddhi is the cognitive aspect of the mind because it is most transparent and nearest to the intelligent self. He says it first receives the light from it's the reflection of the radiance of the Atman. That is why he says most of the spiritual or intelligent men identifies with their buddhi first. They trust their organs, they trust their eyes, but they trust their buddhi more. You may see certain things. We see many things in life, but appearances can be deceptive. So a wise man does not just go by appearances. A foolish animal, it just gets frightened when it sees certain things. A man is wise. It just, if he's discriminative enough, he thinks, let me just wait, let me see. So a man of discrimination first identifies with his buddhi. Then he identifies with his mind. Then he identifies, gives importance to the organs. So the appearances that appear to him cannot deceive him. So next comes the manas, the willpower and the emotional aspect of the mind. That's why they say buddhi should control the emotions. Sometimes the emotions control the buddhi and our buddhi gets disturbed. We take wrong decisions because emotions overpower it. So Shankaracharya says the control should be from top to bottom. We start with the buddhi. That pure light of buddhi should pass through the emotions and the willpower aspect of our mind. Then it receives the radiance of consciousness of the buddhi, the pure light. It gets diluted a little bit or it gets a little faded. But still, because it has come through the sharp buddhi or the transparent buddhi, a very well-developed buddhi, it will not make mistakes. It will not allow your emotions to overtake and take wrong decisions. Then it will not misguide the body and the prana. Otherwise, out of fear, you may do some harm to somebody who has not come to harm you. If you were a man without buddhi, just seeing somebody or seeing something, you just do something drastic, anticipating. But a wise man will wait. Let us see what is the intention. So the radiance of consciousness in a wise person is radiated through the buddhi, and then it reaches the mind, manas. Then the organs receive the radiance of consciousness being connected with the mind, because the mind has to instruct them to act. And then the body acts. The organs are finer things. They are finer because the eyes see. And then there is reaction by the body, whichever way the buddhi tells it. You do this, you do that. So that is why the sum and substance of what we discussed today is that the Antaratma, which we are trying to realize, successively illumines with the radiance of its effulgence the whole aggregate of body and organs through the buddhi. So that aspects one should remember when we develop. It is the buddhi that we seek to develop, because the sharper or the more luminous our buddhi, the more effective our control of our mind, control of our organs and control of our body will be. They will be under the control of buddhi, they will not control the buddhi, which normally happens. It is our emotions, our lower mind which controls the higher mind. Then misery happens. So that is why all the organs, it's necessary to learn this as a science of how human beings act and react in this world. So as we say, Vedanta is a science of human possibilities. How are our various possibilities determined in this life? What will we ultimately achieve in life? What goal we will reach in life will depend on how we understand and how we not only understand but try to use these different aspects of the human personality and try to find out the different possibilities, the spiritual possibilities that can be realized as a result of this search. So if there are some questions, I can just see. Otherwise, we'll take your leave. Yes, yes. Please type. Somebody wants to ask a question. Would it be possible to incorporate a short meditation session after the sessions? Oh, that would be nice. Yes, I'll think about it. I have to prepare a small text, 4 or 5 brief instructions. And if some of you who are interested, based on what we discussed, so maybe I'll conclude the discussion 10 minutes before, and we will meditate, have a verse from the Upanishads, and try to meditate on that, so that you try to feel what was discussed. That's a very, very good idea and a very good suggestion. So we will try to do that. Yes, yes, that is good. A very good idea, because there is a small book, Universal Prayer by Yatiswaranandji, where different aspects of the Upanishads in beautiful English, because Sanskrit will not make sense to many of us. So we can read the English translation, the free translation. Even Paramanandaji's books are very good. So I think we can meditate, and all of us in their respective places, they can just try to meditate. I'll try to do it in the next class. Yeah. So I'll take your leave now. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.